Hi, thanks for clicking over to watch this video. My name is John Kleitz, and I've been teaching English for a long time in person and more recently online. And I do offer, in full interest of full disclosure, I offer a couple of courses you can learn about in the description below. You can see the links. One is about teaching English online, and which I've been doing since 2012. And the other is specifically about teaching English in Brazil, if Brazil interests you. And I've been teaching Brazilians for, I don't know, a dozen years. So, but this video is not about my courses. It's just information about a question that I get asked so often from potential teachers, and that is, what certificate or certificates do I need to teach English? What's really required? What should I invest in? So let me shrink myself up because nobody really wants to look at me. Anyway, this comes from section 3 of my course about how to teach English online, okay, in which I talk about qualifications and certificates. So what are the common certifications that you might need to teach English? There are two. One is CELTA, which stands for Certificate in English Language Teaching to Adults, and the other is TEFL. Okay, now there are a lot of acronyms in this business, right? And it's easy to confuse them. The TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, is what you would get to qualify you to teach English. And the TOEFL is what a non-native English speaker might get. That's a test of English as a foreign language to prove ability, say, if this student were applying to a university in an English-speaking country. So don't confuse the two, all right? Now, CELTA is offered only via Cambridge University in the UK or its authorized affiliates, and there are many around the world. It is well recognized, well regarded. The programs are a minimum of 120 hours. They were originally face-to-face. These days, there is online training as well, or a combination. The cost is not cheap. You can expect to pay a minimum of about US $1,500, although it may be quoted and likely will be quoted in another currency. And if you'd like more, you can go to the link below. Okay. Now, the other one, which is probably more common, is the TEFL certificate. And an important thing to understand about this one is that a TEFL is not offered by one group. There is, for example, TEFL.org, but there's also, International TEFL Academy. There's a bunch of them, okay? So TEFL certificate is offered by many different organizations, and I think it's important to understand there's not one supervising authority worldwide. Which means that there are differences in the programs, in the curricula, in the quality of the programs. Some are better than others. Most are going to be 100 to 160 hours, which could be contact hours. It could be watching recordings. It could be, again, a mix of face-to-face, online, or some combination of those. The cost really varies greatly, and you'll find specials, and so you want to shop around. Now, here's the question. Do you need one of these certificates? And I will say it depends largely on your path. Path is the word under me there. And schools may ask for one. So let's say you decide that you want to teach either online or in person, and you're going to work through schools. Let them find the students and hand the administration, which is, I work independently. I like working independently, but a lot of teachers are more comfortable, especially when starting out, working through schools. So that's fine. Schools may ask for a certificate. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they do it largely as a marketing thing. They like to show parents of the kids who are the actual students, hey, look, our teachers are certified. I'll talk more about why I'm not such a big fan of certificates for most of you. Okay. Now, if you decide to go indie as I do, then you can decide whether you want to get a certificate or not. But keep in mind, why am I not such a big fan of these certificates? These certificates are designed for traditional classroom training. Okay, so you're going to go to maybe to France or Spain, but likely to Thailand or China or whatever, and you're going to teach a room full of kids in a classroom setting. Okay, that's what these programs are designed for. That's what my program, TEFL program, was designed for. It's a little disappointing because I never intended to do that. I intended to teach business English to adults, you know, more of a one-on-one, one-on-two kind of deal. Shame on me for not doing my homework. Don't let that happen to you. Okay. So as I say, I'm not a big proponent, and I have TEFL certification. There it is. Okay, you can see. So there's my proof. I have one, so I should be you know, encouraging you to get one, right? But what happened was I showed up down in Brazil, proudly waving my certificate around, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. I started out teaching through about 4 schools, I guess, there in Rio, and nobody followed up with TEFL International to verify that I, in fact, had a certificate through them. How do I know that? Because they never took down any of the information on here. They didn't take down my certificate number or the name of the certifying agency, anything. Okay, they just don't care. And that's not unique to Brazil. You're going to find that pretty much across Latin America. You know, I'll talk more about what you do need pretty soon, but across Latin America, having a TEFL certificate doesn't gain you much. And that's maybe in Japan, South Korea, maybe China. I understand in Thailand it's mixed. Some schools do care, some don't. I don't really know about Vietnam, but Asia is kind of a mixed bag. In Europe, it used to be, if you wanted to teach there, that you had to have a TEFL certificate or a CELTA. Excuse me just a second. But the fact of the matter is, to teach English in Europe these days with the Schengen area, if you're not a European citizen or resident of one of those Schengen countries, which is number about 26 now, it's going to be hard for you to get a job teaching English anyway, unless you go through one of the state-sponsored programs like they have in France or Spain, where they put you in secondary schools, primary and secondary schools, to help specifically with conversation. And these programs have their own set of requirements, okay? And even for them, TEFL certificates, I don't think, are usually a requirement. So again, what I'm trying to tell you here is that you may really just not need a TEFL certificate, okay? Considerations, you know, what is the program actually teaching? I think that's the biggest thing. Before you sign up for any program, okay, don't get caught up in the cost or anything yet. Go in and look at what do they teach. Because see, I learned in my program neat stuff like team teaching and building these really elaborate lesson plans and what the goal was for each one, and you know, lots of stuff. Some was more useful than others. Grammar review would be useful for a lot of you guys. Why don't you spend 25 bucks instead on a good grammar text? And you know, like from Raymond Murphy, you know, he's got a couple of good grammar texts out you can get for less than 30 bucks for sure on Amazon, and you know, review the grammar yourself. You know, what is the program actually teaching? And the cost, what's it going to pay? How long will it take to pay for itself? Will it help you to get a job that you wouldn't otherwise? Will you get increased earnings, you know, per hour? And the chances are it's going to take a long time to pay for itself, because, you know, take my program, which was back in 2008, and I think I spent, this is a long time ago, I think I spent something like $1,200 on the tuition itself. And then there were flights down to Costa Rica, which was where the training was held. And then I had to pay for lodging for a month and food for that time, you know, incidentals. And so it was well over $2,000 that I paid for that program, and it was a waste of money for me, okay? Again, you've got to ask yourself, is it even required? Are you investing your time and your money and your stress? Because there's some stress involved in these programs. You're doing teaching in front of other instructors and other people in the class, and you're being evaluated. So there's stress involved too. So, do you really want to put yourself through this? Look to at what your credentials are otherwise. And here's a really important one. Will you teach face-to-face or not? Because these days, a lot of teaching, and especially if we're talking about online teaching, it's really more like tutoring, isn't it? It's like one-to-one tutoring, face-to-face tutoring. Now, these days, there are TEFL certificates geared toward teaching online. I actually took one recently, a few months ago, just to see what was in it. Now, be aware, though, that of a couple of things. You might think, okay, well, this could be good for me. I want to teach online, so I'm going to get a TEFL certificate it's going to show me how to teach online. The content of the one I took was marginally useful, at least some of it. I guess it's a good thing I don't remember the specific institution, but also recognize that a lot of schools won't recognize online TEFL certificates. They want you to have one that was done, on site, face to face. So, and the other thing too is, like for the one I got, you have to have a regular TEFL certificate before you can get this teaching English online TEFL certificate as an add-on. Okay, and that's something to look for too, because you may say, oh, I can get this program for $400, $250 for the TEFL certificate for teaching online, but you first have to get the full TEFL certificate. So that adds considerably, of course, to the cost. And again, schools may not accept online certificates anyway. Let me move myself down here out of the way, see if this helps a bit. Before enrolling in any certificate, TEFL, CELTA, TEFL program, what will you actually learn? That's what's important. What will you actually learn? So that goes back to what I said some slides ago, is look at the curriculum. Okay, what are they going to cover? And I really didn't do that because I didn't know any better at the time. And my TEFL certificate, frankly, was a waste of money for the type of teaching I intended to do. You likely won't be teaching classrooms of Asian kids. If you are, God love you, there's a need for that. There are big markets. The market in China has fallen back. I don't know all the details because I don't teach in that market, but I understand that the Chinese government is really restricting the whole teaching by foreigners, okay, as they want to control what their kids learn. So this is not perhaps the big market that it used to be, but there's still markets, of course, in South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand. But if you're not planning on teaching classrooms of Asian kids, if you prefer, you planning to teach adults, teach, one-on-one, then again, you probably don't need the TEFL certificate. If you do plan to teach in a classroom setting, there's some valuable stuff that you learn in these programs. I would also add that if you think that you're going to make teaching English a career, it's something that you might do for years, you might want to invest in a certificate. It's probably, maybe it's a good thing to have something at least you can put on your card and your Facebook page and so on. Now, if what you want is experience, and this is what I hear a lot of people, well, John, I'm thinking about getting a TEFL certificate because I've never taught English before. I've never really taught anything before. I'm nervous about teaching. Well, if what you really want is experience, volunteer. I did a volunteer program in English, teaching English to new arrivals years ago when I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. And if you live in, mid to larger city, there's almost certainly programs around, okay, where you can sign up and teach on a volunteer basis. No, you don't get paid, but you get that all important experience, okay, which looks really good for later, especially if you want to enroll teaching for school. The other thing is that it's just, it's the type of teaching that you're probably really going to do. Even if you teach online, teaching one-on-one, face-to-face translates really easily to teaching one-on-one online. Okay, and so it's a really good thing. So what I wanted to say is, if you live in a larger or even mid-sized city, go to like the main branch of the public library, go to churches that have big community outreach programs, and ask them if they have opportunities to teach English on a volunteer basis. And I think that you'll find it a very worthwhile experience, and something that's going to make you feel a whole lot more comfortable when you go into teaching English for pay, right? You won't feel, have imposter syndrome or anything. You'll be well grounded. And it doesn't take that long. It doesn't take that long to get comfortable with this. Now, other requirements, let's talk quickly about this. I've been focusing on the certificates, but you probably have questions now, but what else? Well, ideally, you would be a native speaker, or at least near native. You would look the part. And, look, I feel uncomfortable saying this, but I feel also obligated to say that, like, if you look like me and I look very gringo, have blue eyes, it helps. Okay. If you are going to, want to teach in Asia or, even Latin America, and you're Black or mixed race, you may find it a little hard go. There's a heavy demand all around the world for English classes from native speakers. So if you are a native speaker, you'll find work. But there was a blog by a Black woman who taught English in South Korea, and she talked about some of the special challenges. So, you need to recognize they're out there. Ideally, you'll have a 4-year degree. It doesn't have to be in English, doesn't have to be in education, journalism, anything like that. Can be in any subject. You ideally, at least as far as schools are concerned, you'd have a TEFL or CELTA certificate. I teach independently, and no, not one, never, ever has an independent student ever asked me what my certificates are. It just hasn't happened. You would also have a desired accent. In some parts of the world, like Latin America, they typically prefer the North American accent. In lots of other parts of the world, Europe, parts of Asia, they'll prefer a British accent. And ideally, you wouldn't be too young or too old. If you're too old, a lot of the schools where you're teaching kids, okay, like in the China market, the big market there is teaching kids. They like young women. They do. Okay. And if you're not let's say under, 35 or under, attractive woman who looks like a gringa, you may find it harder to get hired. That's just the way it is. But don't let that discourage you. There are lots of markets where you can find work where, even if you're not an attractive young woman. Okay, I'm not an attractive young woman, never was. I didn't start teaching till I was 49, and I had no trouble at all finding work from day one. Okay, so you just sort of have to match up who you are and what you bring to the market that you are targeting. Now, so those were ideal requirements, but what does it really take? Okay, what do you really need? Okay, you should be a native or non-native speaker. Okay, you don't want to present yourself as something that you're not. You need to have confidence. Okay, you need to have a good plan, and you may require some persistence. Finding those first students, particularly if you're going indie, might be easy, but it might take a little bit of work. Once you get the first few, they'll tend to send you referrals, and it all gets so much easier. After you get your first 3, 4, it gets so much easier. It really does. I don't do marketing anymore. My students just send new students to me, but you do, at least in the beginning, particularly need to have some persistence. As Yogi Berra used to say, the catcher for the Yankees, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else, so you want to kind of map out a plan. And sorry, I don't want to get off into being an infomercial here, but if you look in my my course about teaching English online, the other one too about teaching English in Brazil, I go a lot into a niche, determining what your niche is going to be, what country you want to teach in, the age of the students, and so on and so on. And looking at your background, do you have a particular background that would allow you to, charge more, for example? Your plan is important. Anyway, this video is really intended to talk principally about whether you need a TEFL certificate or CELTA or not. Again, I think for most of you, probably not worth the investment, but for some of you, perhaps. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about my courses, Teaching English Online and Teaching English in Brazil, just look below in the description. In any case, thanks for watching. How about you give me a thumbs up?